afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi. I'm so happy that you're with me today. This is Point of View, and I am Miss Shirley Polk. Point of View. And my sisters and my cousin, of course, they're not with me today, but one day they will be back with me. And I am just so thankful to God because He has allowed me to come to you and be with you and bring points of view. It is just a wonderful blessing. It is so good. And I hope your day is going very, very, very well. Very well. It's I'm just happy, happy, happy. They say we have a stormy day ahead of us, but I am yet thankful to God because He has blessed us in so many, many ways. He's a wonderful, wonderful God. Dear God, as I sit before you to speak, I pray to you that my soul you will keep. And if I should die before I finish, I pray to you, dear God, in the name of Jesus, that any outstanding sins will be forgiven. Okay, have you ever made an assumption about someone and then found out that you were totally, totally wrong in making that assumption? Have you ever done that? And sometimes we call it prejudging. Have you ever prejudged a person and then found out that you were not on the right track, that you were totally uh, wrong about that person? So, have you ever been in that predicament where you have prejudged someone and found out that you were totally, totally wrong? And I know I've been in that situation before, but I thank God that He gives us what we need to come out of those situations and to be able to say to ourselves, well, I was wrong. I was wrong. So, I want to talk about assuming, people making assumptions about other people and us making assumptions about people, prejudging people, and then how can we deal with that? How can we deal with it? So, we're going into it, and I think I'm in psychology today. And let me see. Let me get over here to it. I'm in psychology today, and I am in, uh, well, I do have that. So let me get to it. Let me get to it. I want to make sure that I give the credit because these sites are so valuable to me. And then when people take their time to do this research and they put it out here for us to use, we should give them full credit for their work. And then I add my point of view to it. So this is point of view, and we're in a conscious rethink. That is the other site we're in. And in a conscious rethink, we're going to talk about how to stop making assumptions, how to stop making assumptions. Now, sometimes uh, we can call some things for our protection, and I believe that, uh, and I won't call it making assumptions. I believe we call it intuition. We say it's the Spirit of God telling us some things that we need to know ahead of time so that we won't get into situations that we really don't need to be in. So that's not what I'm talking about today, okay? Don't assume I know what you mean. So this is a story about a lady. She sent her husband to the store, and it tells us to stop, take some time, and be clear. Be clear about things. Don't just assume that you know exactly what a person is talking about, even though you may, but you can still get some understanding. And don't assume that somebody does or does not know something. Get some clarifications because so many people assume things negatively and positively about people, and they need to go back and make sure that they get an understanding. Elder Coffee will tell us, in all you get an understanding. So, Don't assume I know what you mean. Don't assume. Stop. Take some time to be clear. This is a story about a lady that sent her husband to the store. And it's going to ask, has there been any time this week you were frustrated with your spouse, your significant other, or family member because they just didn't get it? They just didn't get it, but hey, did you give it so that they could get it? So there are so many things that we have to look at both sides of these things. When we're dealing with people, do you think they should just know? And sometimes we take it for granted in our thinking that people should just know. And we probably say, well, you should have known what I meant. No, that's common sense. I think we've probably all said that to someone or even to ourselves. So, or what you were talking about, they should have known what you were talking about, or you should have known what they were talking about. We've all been there. For multiple communication exchanges, we assume that someone else knows what we mean. And I don't think I changed my topic up here. Let me go and change this subject right quick. Uh, I'm just going to put assumptions in here. Assuming that uh, I'm just going to put assumptions. Okay, got that. Assumptions. And hopefully I spelled it right. Let me make sure. Assumptions. Got it. Want to make sure that I got it right. Okay. I'm just so happy that you're with me today. It makes me feel so good because you're with me today and every day that you come on here with me. It makes me feel so good. So it's something. It got me to thinking because sometimes have you ever dealt with people and you've been, mm, I guess you could call it insulted because they've assumed something about you and it's nowhere near being you, the true you. Have you ever done that? I know there's a light behind me. I left the drapes open today. So let me see if I can do this with my. I had some different colors on my light here so that it could help me out. Let me see here. So I'm going to look at some and do some of these colors because it was helping me out a little earlier. It was dimming that light, but I like the light from the drapes. It's going to come up right. Okay, let me see here. I think that's good. I think that might be good. But anyway, we will see. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to. I might not want to keep it there, but people assume things about people. I'll keep it at that light right there. And sometimes they are completely wrong. Completely wrong. And there have been times when people could have had good partnerships. They could have had good communication with each other, but because of the pre-assuming mindset, some people have never been able to come together and be something good for the world because people assume things. And many times those assumptions are very wrong. All right. So I want to talk about this lady right here when she sent her husband to the store. So I know I've said that three times, but I'm going to get to it, okay? All too often during each day for multiple communication exchanges, we assume that someone else knows what we mean, and we do. We know that to be a fact. So, why do we do this? In certain fields like science and technology, we may have an assumption and then test that assumption to see if it's true or not, testing a hypothesis, or making an inference from something we have learned is perfectly natural. But in relationships, assumptions can be very destructive. Well, and as she goes on to say, oh, did I give her name? I think it's a her. Let me see here. Yes, Beverly D. Flaxington. And her is talking about understanding other people. Now I can go on. And this is Psychology Today. In relationships, assumptions can be very destructive, and that's true. So, one of her favorite stories to illustrate was on a radio show. She said, for she was having and conducting she was being interviewed, excuse me. So, the host told a story of how she had prepared a list for her husband of several items she needed at the store. She thought it made sense to number the list and assumed that her husband would benefit from the number. So each item she went down, item number one, item number two, etc. Unfortunately, can you guess what happened? Can you guess what happened? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to tell me what you feel like happened. She numbered the list. She took it for granted that her husband understood it, but she thought, well, I'll just number each one of them so he can get a good understanding. Okay? The 10 seconds is up. Unfortunately, her husband thought that the numbers on the list meant the number of items. You got it now? He bought one bag of sugar, two bags of flour, up to 20 bags of 20-pound dog food because she assumed that by putting these numbers there, he would totally understand and totally get it. Now we can laugh at the story, but think about what probably happened once he got home. She was probably furious and his lack of sense, what she would assume, okay, and he was furious at her assumptions of not taking the time to be clear about what she meant. So when another person assumes incorrectly what we mean or assumes something about us, we don't often think, well, hmm, that's a reasonable assumption. Instead, we think, what is wrong with them? Oh, yes, we've been there, haven't we? We think, what is wrong with them? So while we make assumptions throughout the day, and some research shows that we are wrong better than 50% of the time, we can at times be annoyed with other people who do it to us. And yes, yes. And sometimes we think, and sometimes it doesn't make you feel so good when people assume, especially when people assume that they are more uh, intelligent. And you can feel it when people think that they are more intelligent than you, they're more versed in whatever they're doing than you, and they might be in some areas. But then some people look down on people because they assume that they don't know what to do, they don't know what they're talking about. Well, they do this, but I can do it better. And all of that, those are assumptions. Sometimes we make assumptions because we simply don't have the time to think something through or do an analysis and check for understanding. And I believe that. I believe that's true. So we might be on the highway on our and our partner says, turn here. And we think they mean the next exit when maybe there was a side road running off the highway, and that's what they were referring to. Uh, so it would not be practical at 60 miles per hour to turn and ask them, what do you mean exactly? And I think we've all done that. If you're a driver, passenger in a car, you're looking for a place, or you might see something you might be interested in and say, well, turn right here, but you're going too fast. The driver, or you, whoever the driver is going too fast at that point in time to make that turn. And so then what do? We go up the road and safely find a place that we can use to turn around and go back if we agree on doing that. All right? So now, what do you mean exactly? We don't have time, just, we're driving 60, 70 miles per hour and turn to, what are you talking about? That's dangerous. So, however, in our normal day to day lives, we often don't stop and take the time that we should to inquire about what someone else means or is trying to say. We don't practice active and reflective listening. We don't practice like we should. Active and reflective listening. Active listening is when we seek to understand more than wanting to be understood. Okay? And that makes sense. That makes so much sense. Let me get here because I want to see. Thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate it. We're talking about assuming and making assumptions. And sometimes these assumptions are premature and they're unjust, they're unfair assumptions. They definitely are. So I'm looking up at my good afternoon, Sister Leora. Good afternoon, Sister Bertha. Good afternoon, Sister Velma. And we all know each other by our first names anyway, but hi y'all. Thank you so much for being with me. We don't practice active and reflective listening. And then going back about the active listening is when we seek to understand more than wanting to be understood. We ask questions, we probe for what's underneath a person's statements, and we engage until we have our own personal aha about what the other individual is trying to communicate. And those can be in a positive way or in a negative way, but we want understanding, don't we? We must have clarification because somebody could say, I want to talk with you. And then you might really like this person and look up to this person. And then it comes down to it that this person is saying something that is not good to you or for you. We have expectations of people. We have assumptions that this is what this is going to be and this is what this is going to be. But when someone speaks to you or someone uses some kind of action against you, if the time is set and it's the right time, then get an understanding. Okay, why did you say this? What do you mean about saying this? Why did you do this? What was your reason for doing this? Get some clarification, get some accurate communication about what is going on. Reflective listening is when we mirror back what we think we have heard. Okay, so in her example here, she says the husband could have practiced this by saying, this list contains the things you want and also has the number of each item. So, for example, I am to get 3 bags of flour and 20 bags of dog food. He could have said that. So, the wife could then see the mistake and fix it before the shopping trip was over. So, we are all in so much of a hurry that we don't stop to do this, and that's for real. And then it comes down to the relationship. It comes down to the relationships because there are different types of relationships, different types of tolerances in the relationship. If you don't have a good relationship, then if one questions the other and the other often gets offensive offended or and gets defensive about being questioned, then what do you do? So how do we know this wasn't that situation where the wife could have been a domineering person? Not saying she was. She put the numbers on there and he did exactly what he thought she wanted him to do. There are different types of relationships. People have different types of relationships. Now I'm telling you, in some homes, the women are dominant some homes, the men are dominant some homes, that each one is just so difficult to be with and they just stay together. There are all kinds of situations. So we have to have this understanding, get an understanding of what's going on, and we have to know if you've been with a person a while, then you should know how to deal with them. If I've been with a person, I should know through experience how to deal with that person. Now, some people are just difficult to deal with. They're just difficult to deal with, and that's another show. All right? And yet, think about the frustration and wasted time when we don't get what we want. We would save ourselves and those we care about much angst if we just took the time during our conversation and communication to clarify. So we can also make assumptions about people. We see a sticker on their bumper, and we haven't we? Oh yes, these bumper stickers. We see a sticker on their bumper, or hear them talk about a political candidate, or hear what they are doing for the weekend, and we assume we know what kind of person they must be. Yes, we do. So we often don't realize our filters are operating like this, and we are not letting the person fully reveal themselves. But rather, we are identifying who they must be and then putting them in the box that fits. And don't we put people in boxes and people put us in boxes that we don't even fit in, okay? All right. But we have certain little boxes. What is it? What is it? Virtual boxes, invisible boxes. We just poke people here and there and everywhere. What I think of you, this is where you belong. It's you over here, you over there, you over there, you up there, you down there. We do sometimes assume things that are not correct about people, but it's, we go by how they act and what it seems like they might act like, and then we put them in that little box. So, how many of us have had the experience where we assume something about someone, but then we find out something entirely different once we explore further or get to know the person? And so she's saying, I can say that I've had this happen on many an occasion, and it has taught me to watch my own filters. We miss out on really knowing another person and who they are, what they care about, when we don't take the time to let them reveal themselves. And I want to say this. I said it a long time ago. I know from point of view in the earlier years. I've told this. I might have told it on Great Gospel Temple. I was working with a lady. She was a co-worker. We started working together, and people had started saying negative things about her to me, and this and that and the other. And so when we started working together, I knew that we were going to be working together. But then when we started working together, then the Lord told me, "You learn her for yourself." And I heard that voice and I adhered to it. I obeyed it, and we became friends. Yes, we did. We became friends because I learned her for myself. All of that that people have been saying, I did not dwell on that. I learned her for myself, and it was totally different. So think about your own assumptions. Are there types of people you generally like or don't like? And we can all think about some things like that. Are there certain phrases or types of language that are turned off or that you gravitate towards? It can be interesting to explore our own filters and the assumptions that fill them. It can be very interesting. And so Beverly D. Flaxington teaches at Suffolk University, and she has books on a book online, Bell's Books on Facebook and Twitter, which is now X. So that's the psychology today. So we do make assumptions. Yes, we do. We are all honest people, and we know we've made assumptions about people, and we've assumed things about people, and they have been totally wrong. And people have assumed things about us. It is something. And then you get, like I said in the beginning, you get annoyed when you know people are assuming that they are better than you. They call themselves looking down on you. And I had an, oh gosh, I know. And then this is why we have to look at the situation, and sometimes no words are exchanged, but actions. And we have to assume, because there are some people who are introverts, extroverts, and there are some people who are ambiverts. They're a little bit of the intro and the extro. But an introvert is a person that's shy, quiet, and all that. Extrovert is an outgoing person, and ambivert is a person that's a little bit of both of them. But there are some people who are super, super introverted. And so not too long ago, there was a person that came into my company as well as some other people's company. And when that person sat at the table, she didn't make eye contact. She didn't try to speak to anybody or anything. And she did this all through the function. So when she sat down, the person gave her a seat. She deliberately, you can tell when a person's deliberately trying to not see you. And she did that. And then, of course, the way she had to turn to be able to see the people on the microphone. And so that meant that her back was turned to us, but she did not make an effort to speak. So my thing was, and then it depends too, because we've seen this so much. So when she did that, I just kind of like, I didn't bother her because I didn't know her. And sometimes, you know how we get sometimes, we want to make it a point to make a person, speak to us or see if they're going to speak to us. And sometimes we'll say, well, how you doing? Or something like that. I didn't do that because I don't like to bother people, because I don't want people bothering me. Because she could have been a super introverted person. And even though she was out in this public function and she was with a certain person, and sometimes when we think that people are escorting a certain person who has a high level of authority, a high position, that sometimes they feel like they're more important than anybody else because they are assisting this person. Now, sometimes that is true, for real. That happens, and that's what gets us off into this frame of mind that you think that you're better than I am. You're assuming that you're better than I am, but you don't know me. And so I'm thinking about that, and I have to think about all the other things that play into this. This person could have been a super introvert. She could have. And so that makes me think a little differently about it now. But there are people that assume things about you. They assume you don't know what you're talking about. They assume you don't know this, you don't know that. There are people who don't flaunt their education. They don't flaunt their talents. They don't flaunt their gifts. They don't do any of that. They just do what they do when they're getting ready to do it. That's what they do. And then some people look at them because they're not saying, oh, I have a doctorate. I have this and I have that. They assume that people are sometimes dummies compared to them. And we all know people like that. So people make assumptions, and they make unjust, unfair assumptions of people. And then sometimes those assumptions turn out to be right. Now, when they are, then we have to know how to be dignified in the situation so that we won't be ugly toward that person. Okay? So, getting to this, all right, that's my point of view. Let me get to this here, this article. How to stop making assumptions. And here are eight highly effective tips. How to stop making assumptions. People assume so many things. Well, I assumed that. No, don't assume. Just ask me. Well, I assumed that you wouldn't want to be bothered, but just try. We get all kinds of actions and reactions from people because of pre assumptions and all of that, prejudging and all of that. And sometimes it causes so much confusion. How to stop making assumptions. Eight highly effective tips. Eight highly effective tips. And we're in a conscious rethink. A consciousrethink.com. Have you ever been in a situation where you've assumed something about someone else's words, about their actions or intentions, only to be completely wrong? I can imagine that probably each one of us has. Each one of us has. Hi, thank you so much for being with me today. Maybe you've damaged relationships and friendships by assuming uh, the worst about people and their motivations. And sometimes, it's not always good to just speak. Sometimes it's better to just observe, quietly observe. Because some people are so quick to yep, just start running their mouths and talking about things, and then end up, like I said, they made damaging remarks, they've damaged relationships. But we have to be wise. And I'm going to the scriptures, wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We have to use that wisdom that God has given to us, but then we have to be meek and humble like a dove, a bird of peace. Things will go so much better. And sometimes it's hard to hold our peace when we feel like we should be giving a piece of our mind. But we just have to remember these things and to keep calm and be rational in every situation. So, or you've worked yourself into a lather, assuming that uh, you failed an exam. And we think about that, when we take our tests, and or we go to the doctor and there's some kind of test there or something like that. We have assumptions. What if? So if you've worked yourself into a lather assuming these things, or are suffering from some terminal ailment, only to discover that everything was all well and good, and we just worried ourselves into a headache or a backache or something, and then it turns out that all is well. So many difficult situations can be avoided if we learn how to stop assuming that we know what's going on. And that is a part of our lives. We just things just happen, and so many times we assume that the worst is happening. We do, and that's a part of life. We seem like we just can't help it. But these articles are going to help us to at least practice some of these things. Okay? Work yourself into a lather about it and found out that everything is hunky dory, as they say. You've probably heard the phrase, when you assume, you make, and what's that they call a donkey sometimes, out of you and me. When you assume, you make a mockery, I'll put it like that, out of you and me. But making assumptions goes beyond just looking or behaving like a person that looks foolish, okay? Sometimes you can cause real damage to relationships or situations by jumping to conclusions and acting upon them before you have tangible details to work with. So many in life, we've all been guilty of this. We've all been guilty. So, fortunately, you don't have to be trapped by your own negative thoughts spirals. You can take steps to be more aware of how you react to things and choose to respond accordingly. Oh, yes. So, what follows is a list of things that we can do to stop making assumptions. And then we can avoid the negative effects of those assumptions when we make the wrong assumptions. Okay? Now, here we go. How to avoid making assumptions. How to avoid. This is a consciousrethink.com. It's easy, and it's easy for someone to suggest that you just stop doing what you're doing, but certain ingrained behaviors take time and effort to undo, and that's for real. It takes time to undo some things that we have been doing for decades. It takes time, and that's why when people have habits like smoking or drinking, or they are addicted to some substance or something like that, and they've been doing this over time, it might seem, I mean, just we don't have to even say any effort to, you need to get your life together. You need to stop that. You need to do this. But it takes time. It takes time when you are a person that has always had your assumptions about things. We've assumed things about people. Sometimes, most of the time, it takes time to be able to stop doing that. It's easy for someone to suggest that you just stop doing what you're doing, but certain ingrained behaviors take time and effort to undo. So you can still do certain things to rein in, REIN, your tendency is for making assumptions, especially when these assumptions are harmful. I must get a drink of water. But it's not water, it's my lemonade. My lemonade. How do we stop this? We have to practice these things. Let me check here. I have to make sure that everything is cosmetically right because Sunday I realized that something was not right, and so that I had to delete that video and make it an audio. So I had to do that because I like for things to be in order. Number one, ask. When we want to stop making those assumptions, especially the ones that are harmful or pre-assuming this and that, this is first on the list. What do we do? Ask. This is first on the list because it's the most important thing you can possibly do, and that's ask. Think about a time when someone assumed something about you instead of asking you whether it was true or not. Can you think of any situations like that that have happened in your life? Were you upset by that situation? Did you feel frustrated or even hurt because they didn't bother to find out your side of the story? Oh, yes, been there. Oh, yes. Now consider how others feel when you're on the other side of this scenario. Consider, okay, we can never know what other people are thinking or feeling unless we have the courtesy to ask them. In fact, 99.9% of the time, what we assume that another person is thinking or feeling is usually dead wrong, if not the complete opposite of what's actually going on inside them. These things, this is nice. This is nice. I like this. Have you ever been on the receiving end of someone informing you of what you're thinking? Oh, yes, we know we all have, haven't we? For instance, have you ever heard someone say to you, "You think you're better than me," or "You think you're so smart," and so on? Has anybody ever said that to you? And so, in our, what is it? What do we call it? In our form of, hmm, well, in our culture, you think you're something. Have you ever been told that? You just think you're better than everybody else. Have you ever been told that? Have you ever said that to someone else? So, have you ever heard someone say that to you? So, chances are that couldn't have been further from the truth, but they were so focused on projecting their insecurities onto you that what was actually going on with you didn't even come into the equation. You hear that? Their own insecurities. See, that's where we're going. That's it. People make pre assumptions on you, and many times it's because of their own insecurities. Oh, yes. And you are a threat to them, they think. You intimidate them because they think that you are a threat. And because they said you think you're better than everybody else, you think you're something, they're really thinking that. And they feel beneath you. So that means that they're insecure. And for them to be able to feel something or to have what they call a one up, I call it a half up, okay? That's what I'm calling it. On you, they will throw it at you. You think you're something. You think, she thinks she's this, he thinks he's this, and all of that. Okay. So as a result, file this one under the whole treat others as you would like to be treated umbrella for real. So if you would prefer someone to ask you what's going on in your heart and mind instead of assuming and accusing you, then grant them that same courtesy because sometimes it's, like I said, do unto others as you would them do unto you. Don't prejudge, and maybe they won't prejudge you. And if they still prejudge you, then you don't have to prejudge them or assume because they do. Okay? So ask. Number two, work with facts, not emotions. So many people can have the facts, but they'd rather work with emotions than the facts because they have this thing, these insecurities, and they want to get you told. Okay? Work with facts, not emotions. People who lean toward hypochondria will often fall into emotional uh, what's the maelstroms due to their assumptions. Mm, mm, mm. They might have a symptom or two that may possibly be associated with some awful, potentially terminal illness, and then they start spiraling. They'll think about all the treatments they'll need to go through, how much that'll hurt, and how they might only have a short amount of time left with their loved ones. My goodness. So, what is this? This is said work with facts, not emotions. They might have symptoms or two that they might possibly be associated. It might possibly be associated with something horrible. So from there, they'll freak out about the possibility of not seeing their children grow up or feel anguish at not accomplishing all they wanted to, and so on. So this will just keep getting bigger and bigger until they're experiencing full on panic attacks, and when they get test results back from the doctor and find out it's absolutely nothing to be worried about, then they get the test. Now they've taken it out on you, they've taken it out on everybody else. And now they because they are assuming that something is wrong. And when you assume something, especially in yourself, when you're thinking something is wrong, do you know that can make you sick? I mean, physically, emotionally ill. So as soon as they get that information, all the panic and despair simply stop. Why? Because they had solid answers to work with rather than wild assumptions veering off in all directions. I've literally seen someone stop hyperventilating mid panic attack because they suddenly had tangible details to work with. So, have you ever thought something about a person and thought this and that or the other, and then you somebody tells you, "Well, this is how they really like you, they really care about you," and you thought all along that this person doesn't like you, they don't care about you, they hate you, and all of that, and then they themselves could come along and show you something completely different. So the same thing often happens when we assume things about a person or a situation rather than working with tangible facts. See, that's what makes it good, the facts. FACTS. So many times we don't wait to get the facts. And that's where things go awry in many, many cases. So let's say you're in a raging fury because your favorite uh, bento box is missing. You assume that your housemate has taken it and put something you either don't eat or are allergic to in it, and now it's going to be ruined forever, and you'll have to either bleach it or get a new one. And how could they be so awful? And, and, and then you find it in your bag where you left it on Friday when you came home from work. Well, we've been there, haven't we? We have been there. So take a moment to look at how angry you got over absolutely nothing. There was nothing there. Nothing there. And so, have you ever, I don't know about this, but have you ever been in a situation where in your earlier years, I know most of you're settled now and you're with your spouses, your significant others, you've been settled for decades and decades. But have you ever had an experience when in your earlier years when you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, depending on your gender, which one? Have you ever been in a situation where you were looking for them and then you think, like you're out at night and maybe you're out on separate things, you going doing your thing with your friends and they're doing their things with their friends, but then you're yet thinking about them and you're trying to find out where they are so you can go there, and then your mind starts working on you. Well, he could be doing this or she could be doing that. They might be, and then you're so frustrated, so upset by the time you get there, and then you see them and they're just there just having fun. None of this stuff that you've imagined in your mind is going on. So now you were out of sorts. You made your blood pressure go up. You had almost a headache and all that. Have you ever done that? So take moments to look at how angry you got over absolutely nothing. You were likely only incandescent with rage over what you'd assumed had happened, and were full of blinding hatred toward a person who had done absolutely nothing wrong. So imagine what could have transpired if you unleashed a torrent of abuse at them over their lack of consideration, only to discover that the transgression was your own, not theirs. My goodness. And that's where we have to become humble and apologize. Okay? So that is why it's so important to work with facts rather than feelings. When we make assumptions about others, we're showing them an immense amount of disrespect and discourtesy, and that's for real. So things get even worse if we attack them because of our feelings rather than anything tangible. And some people attack people and fuss and cuss and out, and they haven't done any of that stuff that they have imagined. So the end result is akin to executing someone because we think they're guilty, not because we have solid facts proving that they are. No solid facts whatsoever. Number three, ask yourself, we're talking about how to stop assuming things, how to stop assuming things. Thank you so much for being with me today. Ask yourself if you're certain that you know what's actually occurring. And then, that could be a tricky thing too, because sometimes you can walk in on something that is actually happening. Then you question yourself as to whether you saw what you saw. Did I really see what I saw? And then another thing is a person, oh, we were just doing it. You didn't see that. That's not what you saw. Oh my goodness, there's so many things that we have to deal with in life, huh? Ask yourself if you're certain that you know what's actually occurring. The best questions you can ask yourself in situations like those described above are, do I know for a fact that this is true? Or do I have enough evidence to prove that this is the case? Think of it like being in court having to prove a case. Unless you have X number of facts that can prove that this situation is in fact what you assume to be, the case would be thrown out due to lack of evidence. Assumptions are not reality, hard facts and evidence are. Assumptions are not reality, hard facts and evidence are. So we have to keep that in mind. It's also important to note that just because you've experienced certain things in the past, that doesn't mean that new circumstances will unfold the same way, even if they share certain traits. So many times when we've had bad experiences that we feel like we're very cautious, and many times would be about things that are going to happen in the future because of things that have happened in the past. And sometimes we miss out on good things for us because we're judging what's happening now by what happened in the past. And so this is what this is saying to us. It says, let me get it. It's also important to note that just because you've experienced certain things in the past, that doesn't mean that new circumstances will unfold the same way, even if they share certain traits. So, as an example, let's say your partner told you that they'd call you on their lunch break, but by 12:15 you haven't heard from them yet. Depending on what you've experienced in the past, your heart and mind may leap in several different directions, and that is natural. That's natural. For instance, you may worry that something horrible has happened to them and fly off into a panic spiral. Alternatively, you might assume that they're banging one of their coworkers in the supply closet and start to get enraged about all the details you're envisioning. And that word, I could have gotten a better word for that, but I didn't. I read. I didn't write this. I'm reading what the author wrote. Okay, so you think that because they played off on you and now you're in a new a relationship that this person might be doing the same thing. So assuming things in our minds can really be tricky because it doesn't have to be that, and then sometimes it could be exactly what you're thinking. So there's so much to consider here, okay? But most of all, you have to consider your health, your emotional, and your physical health. You still have to take care of you. Whatever the assumption is, whether it's right or whether you were totally wrong, you know how to apologize if you've gone off the rails and you've and told them off and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully they'll understand. All right. So and that's why it's so important. Now don't tell all I'm telling you, don't tell all let me see what is maybe to say. Oh, don't tell all you know, but know what to tell. Because you don't tell every single thing that happened to you or that you did. That's unhealthy. Some things you take to your grave or wherever, take to eternity with you. Don't tell everything. Okay? Don't tell everything. Tell the things that will help in the relationship, but you can't afford to tell every single thing. All right? So that's my advice. That's my advice. When and if you feel your mind spiraling, take a deep breath and come back to this moment. Can you say with complete certainty that you know what's going on? If you can't, then focus on something else until you hear from this person. They might have been pulled into an emergency meeting before they could get to their phone, or they were seized with an intense bathroom issue and couldn't get reception to text you from the stall. So many things can happen. Wait for information and then respond accordingly instead of assuming and reacting to your own assumptions. So many relationships have been destroyed by people assuming things and comparing one relationship to the other. Now, I'm not telling you to ignore the signs. You have to pay attention to the signs. Okay? We have to be wise and we have to be attentive to the things that go on. Number four, be aware of your own projections. We talked about how to stop assuming or like assuming the worst or assuming wrongly, okay? Number four, be aware of your own projections. Now, this touches upon the previous tip with regard to assuming things based on prior experiences. Many people fall into the habit of assuming things of others because it's what they have or haven't experienced themselves. For example, if you've been cheated on in the past, see, you might assume that the partner who's late calling or texting you is cheating because that's what you've been wired to brace yourself against. Or if you had someone close to you die in a car accident, you may assume the worst when your partner is late coming home. There's so many things that could go through our minds. That's why we keep check on each other. So these assumptions are projections from previous experiences and can cause far more emotional strife than necessary. And the other day, it might have been Tuesday, where I was saying, if I leave home and because OnStar in my car is not working now because it's what 2G instead of 4 and 5G now, then I have to have my phone in order to be in contact with OnStar. Oh my goodness, my time is gone. So God willing, we'll come back and we'll talk about what is this number 4, be aware of your projections. I thank you so much for being with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are wonderful. You are wonderful. And I pray and trust that you will have the rest of the day will be an awesomely wonderful day. If anybody's having a birthday, if anybody's celebrating an anniversary, happy birthday, happy anniversary. Thank you so much for being with me. You are awesome. You are awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Enjoy the remainder of your day. God willing, I will see you on Saturday at 7:39 p.m. and Sunday at 7 a.m. And then I have a prayer. The Lord uh, spoke to me about 2 weeks ago and told me to start posting prayer. So I have one prayer on Facebook, I think, and another one could be on there also. So I'm just praying for everyone, including myself in general. People need someone praying for them and with them. So I just want to tell you that. And then I also have my podcast again. It's the podcast that I did early along with this. So there's so many things. And don't forget the music, please. I love you so much. Enjoy the remainder of your day.